The auction yard smelled of damp hay and old sweat. Beneath a low gray sky, people shuffled between pens, their boots pressing deep into the mud as the sharp crack of a whip and the restless snorting of horses filled the air. In the far corner stood a brown gelding, his coat dulled by neglect, ribs faintly visible beneath the thin layer of fur. His head hung low, eyes clouded, tail twitching weakly against the flies that swarmed around him. Every few seconds, he flinched as though expecting another blow. The murmurs of the crowd drifted toward him like smoke, harsh, careless words meant to sting, but not meant for his ears alone. "That one's worthless," someone said, spitting into the dirt. "Wouldn't pull a cart straight, much less carry a rider." "Poor thing should have been put down ages ago," another muttered, turning away. The auctioneer lifted his voice, booming and impatient. "Lot 47, male, 5 years, been through 2 owners already. Who'll start me at 50? Silence. A few men chuckled. Someone in the back scoffed. From behind the crowd, Emma watched. She had arrived late, the hem of her jeans soaked and her hair damp from the drizzle that had begun before dawn. She looked younger than her 26 years, but there was a kind of weariness behind her gray-blue eyes that no youth could hide. She hadn't come here to buy anything. She'd only promised to help a friend haul a saddle from a next stall over. Yet when her gaze fell upon the trembling horse, she stopped moving entirely. There was something about him, a sadness too familiar. He reminded her of the way she used to stand after her accident, when every sound felt too loud, every light too bright, when people whispered about what she'd lost. The auctioneer's voice cut through the air again. "Come on, folks, 50 to start? 40. His tone grew sharper, more desperate. 30 then. Still, no hands rose. Emma felt her heart quicken. She didn't know why she suddenly lifted her arm. It was as if her body moved before her thoughts did. 30, she said quietly, her voice nearly swallowed by the rain. Heads turned. A few people laughed, and the auctioneer blinked, surprised. "We have 30. Any advance on 30? No one answered. "Sold." The gavel slammed down, and with it came a burst of soft laughter from the onlookers. To the young lady in the back. Emma stepped forward, handing over the bills with trembling fingers. The stable hand handed her the rope, and the horse's head jerked away immediately, eyes wide with panic. She spoke gently, her voice barely above a whisper. "Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt you." The horse pawed at the ground, uncertain. When she reached out, he pulled back again, shivering. The stable hand sighed. "Good luck with that one, miss. He's been trouble since the day he arrived." Emma nodded absently, her attention fixed on the horse. "What's his name?" The man shrugged. "Never really kept one. Folks just called him the useless one." She frowned, then tugged gently on the rope. "Not anymore." They walked slowly out of the yard, the rain thickening into a steady curtain. Each step the horse took was hesitant, his ears flicking at every sound. Mud splashed against Emma's boots, and her jacket clung to her shoulders, but she didn't care. The laughter of the crowd faded behind her, replaced by the steady rhythm of hooves and rain. On the drive home, the truck rattled along the winding road. The horse shifted restlessly in the trailer, kicking once, twice. Emma kept her eyes on the road, but spoke softly through the open window toward him. "I don't know why I did that," she murmured. "Maybe because I know what it feels like when everyone decides you're not worth saving." Her farmhouse sat at the edge of a field bordered by tall pines. She had inherited it from her father years ago, but had long since lost its warmth. Dust gathered on unused tack, and the stable that once held 6 horses now echoed with emptiness. Only the sound of rain dripping from the roof filled the silence as she backed the trailer into place. When she opened the gate, the horse hesitated again. His eyes darted from the dark stable to the open field, uncertain where to go. She gave him space, stepping aside, letting him choose. Slowly, he walked forward, the rope slack between them. Inside the stable, she spread fresh hay and set down a bucket of water. "It's not much," she said quietly, "but it's dry." The horse didn't drink. He stood in the corner, his body tense, as though waiting for punishment. Emma crouched nearby, resting her chin on her knees, watching the rise and fall of his ribs. Hours passed. The rain stopped. The last light of evening crept through the stable boards, painting thin gold lines across the floor. She whispered, "You'll need a name." Her gaze softened. "How about Chance?" He flicked an ear toward her, the first real sign of awareness. She smiled faintly. "Yeah, Chance. Feels right." Later, inside her kitchen, she sat by the window with a cup of tea gone cold. Through the glass, she could see the dim outline of Chance lying in the straw, still and silent. Her mind wandered to the accident that had ended everything. How her championship mare had stumbled mid-jump, how the world turned upside down, and how, when she woke, doctors said she'd never ride again. The memory tightened her chest, but she forced herself to look away. Outside, an owl called from the pines. She rose, went back to the stable, and stood quietly by the door. Chance shifted when he saw her, his eyes reflecting the lantern light. "I don't know if I can help you," she said softly, "but I'll try. Maybe we both deserve another chance." He didn't move, but his breathing slowed. Thunder rolled faintly in the distance, a leftover grumble from the storm. Chance flinched at the sound, jerking his head up. The rope strained, and he stumbled backward, nostrils flaring. Emma stayed where she was, calm, steady. "Easy," she murmured again. "You're safe now." For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them felt fragile, balanced on a single breath. Then Chance lowered his head, the tension in his muscles easing slightly. Emma took one step closer, not enough to startle, just enough to show she wasn't afraid. Her voice was barely a whisper now. "We'll start over. You and me." Lightning flashed far away, illuminating the fields beyond the stable. The glow faded, leaving only darkness and the sound of quiet breathing. When she finally turned to leave, she paused at the door and looked back once more. The horse had not lain down again, but he was watching her now, eyes clearer than before. Emma smiled faintly, pulling her jacket tighter around her. "Good night, Chance," she said. As she closed the door, the lantern flickered, casting one last soft light across the stable wall. Outside, the wind carried the smell of wet earth and hay. Somewhere deep in her chest, beneath the exhaustion and the doubt, something small and stubborn began to stir, a spark of hope she hadn't felt in years. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or if she had the strength to train a horse everyone had given up on. But as the first stars broke through the thinning clouds, Emma whispered into the quiet night, as much to herself as to him, "Maybe this time, things will be different." And for the first time in a long while, she believed it. The morning came quiet and cold. Mist hung low over the fields, clinging to the fences and the thin blades of grass. Emma stood by the stable door, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of coffee, watching the brown horse inside. Chance hadn't moved much through the night. He stood still, head lowered, his breath visible in the chill air. She had left the gate to the small paddock open, but he hadn't stepped outside once. For 3 days, he barely touched his feet. Every sound made him flinch, the creak of the barn door, the caw of crows overhead, the distant hum of a passing truck. Emma spoke softly to him each morning, never too close, never too loud. "You're safe now," she said again and again, her words like a quiet rhythm that filled the empty air. Still, he stayed wary, a creature too used to disappointment to believe in gentleness. On the 4th day, she noticed something different. When she entered the stable with fresh hay, Chance didn't retreat to the corner. He watched her, ears twitching but legs steady. She froze for a moment, hardly daring to breathe, then slowly placed the hay down and stepped back. "Good boy," she whispered. It wasn't much, but it was a start. In the days that followed, she worked quietly around him, mending fences, cleaning stalls, humming to herself without expectation. The rhythm of her presence began to fill the silence of the place. At dusk, when the world turned gold, she would sit on an old stool outside the stable, sketching the outline of a horse through the wooden slats. Each line on the page felt like a promise, a reminder that patience could still build something whole out of what was broken. A week later, the local vet, Dr. Miller, stopped by to check on him. "You really picked yourself a project," he said, running a careful hand along Chance's side. The horse stood rigid but didn't bolt. "Looks underfed, undertrained, and overscared." Emma nodded. "He just needs time." The vet glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Time and trust, maybe. Both in short supply these days. When he left, Emma lingered beside Chance. "They all think you can't change," she murmured. "But they thought the same about me once." Her mind drifted to the memory she tried so hard to bury, the crowd's gasp, the sickening thud of hooves, her own scream cut short as she hit the ground. For months after the accident, she couldn't even look at a saddle. People told her to move on, to be grateful she could still walk, but every time she saw a horse, guilt clawed its way back to the surface. Now, watching Chance, she recognized the same fear she had once carried, the kind that makes the world smaller, quieter, and infinitely heavier. By the second week, progress came in flickers. Chance began to follow her movements with cautious curiosity. He sniffed the edge of her jacket one morning as she leaned on the gate, then startled himself by doing so. Emma laughed softly, the sound startling them both. It felt strange to laugh again. That evening, she brought him an apple, cutting it into thin slices. "See," she said, holding out her hand. "Nothing to be afraid of." He eyed the fruit suspiciously, then snatched a piece before retreating. She grinned. "Told you so." A small victory, but it filled her with something like joy. Days turned into weeks, and the bond between them deepened in quiet increments. She began walking him in the paddock, the rope loose in her hands. Each step he took toward her felt earned, each moment of stillness shared like a secret. When the wind blew through the trees, carrying the scent of rain, she felt something settle inside her, a peace she hadn't known in years. But peace never lasts long. One afternoon, as Emma led Chance near the fence, a truck pulled up on the dirt road. The engine roared, startling the horse. He reared suddenly, pulling the rope from her hands. Emma stumbled but didn't fall. The truck stopped, and a man stepped out, broad-shouldered, in a pressed shirt and polished boots. "Didn't expect to see you out here again, Emma," he said with a smirk. She recognized the voice instantly, Mr. Dalton, owner of the local ranch, and the man who had once sponsored her competitions before her accident. "Just trying to help him recover," she replied, steadying her breath. Dalton glanced at Chance, who stood trembling near the far fence. "That thing. He's a lost cause. I know his last owner. Couldn't break him, couldn't sell him, couldn't even give him away." Emma folded her arms. Maybe he just needed someone who doesn't want to break him. Dalton chuckled, shaking his head. "You always had a soft spot for hopeless cases." He leaned against the fence, eyes narrowing. "There's a showcase next month. Rehab Horses charity event. You should bring him. Let people see how much progress you've made." He said it like a challenge, each word laced with mockery. Emma hesitated. The thought of stepping into a ring again filled her with both longing and dread. But then she looked at Chance, standing with his ears flicked forward, eyes fixed on her, as if waiting for her answer. "Maybe I will," she said quietly. Dalton smirked, tipping his hat. "Then I'll see you there. Don't say I didn't warn you." The truck rolled away, leaving a trail of dust in the dying light. Emma leaned against the fence, her pulse still racing. She didn't know what had possessed her to agree, but something inside her refused to back down. Maybe she wasn't just saving Chance. Maybe she was saving herself. That night, she stayed up late in the stable, the soft rustle of hay and the steady sound of Chance breathing beside her. "They don't think you can change," she said softly, running a brush over his tangled mane. "They didn't think I could, either." He stood quietly, the tension gone from his body. For the first time, he seemed to trust her touch. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke over the hills, she led him into the open field. Dew sparkled on the grass, and the air smelled of earth and promise. "Let's start small," she whispered. "Just a walk." He followed, slow but willing. Step by step, they traced the edges of the field, the rope slack between them. A robin darted across their path, and Chance didn't flinch. Emma smiled, feeling the fragile thread of connection tighten between them. As they reached the far fence, she stopped and looked out over the valley. The rising sun painted the sky in gold and rose, washing over both of them. "We're going to prove them wrong," she said, her voice filled with quiet certainty. Chance turned his head slightly, ears twitching toward her voice. "Not just for them," she added softly. "For us." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain again, and in that moment, Emma felt it, the beginning of something larger than she could yet understand. She placed a hand on his neck, felt the warmth beneath his skin, and whispered, "This is our second chance." Chance exhaled deeply, as though he understood. The sound of it felt like an answer. And as the sun climbed higher, spilling light over the pasture, Emma realized that for the first time since her fall, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The morning mist curled above the fields like pale smoke as Emma tightened the worn leather halter around Chance's neck. Weeks had passed since she'd taken him from the auction, and the transformation was slow but undeniable. His coat, once dull and patchy, now caught the sunlight with a faint sheen. His eyes, no longer clouded with fear, watched her with a tentative trust. But though the progress was real, Emma knew they were far from ready. The showcase loomed closer each day, and doubt clung to her like a shadow. She led Chance into the paddock, boots sinking into the damp earth. The air smelled of rain and wild grass. "Easy," she murmured, guiding him into a slow walk. He obeyed, ears flicking toward her voice. "That's a good boy." The rhythm of his steps matched the steady beating of her heart. For the first time in years, the sound didn't make her flinch. Training became her daily ritual. Every morning before sunrise, she worked with him, slow circles, halting steps, trust exercises that demanded more patience than strength. Each small success felt monumental, each setback a reminder of how fragile progress could be. Some days Chance regressed, flinching from her touch or refusing to move at all. But Emma had learned something important. Healing wasn't a straight path. It was a series of quiet victories built on persistence. As the days grew warmer, she expanded their training. "Let's try the trot," she said one morning, guiding him through the field. Chance tossed his head but obeyed, hooves thudding rhythmically against the soil. For a few minutes, he moved with grace, until a sudden noise, a bird bursting from the trees, sent him rearing. Emma held tight to the rope, voice calm even as her heart hammered. "It's all right, I've got you." Her tone steadied him more than her grip ever could. By the time he settled, both were trembling. She pressed her forehead lightly against his neck. "You did fine," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. "We'll get there." That afternoon, she visited Mrs. Grafton, her old trainer who had retired years ago but still lived nearby. The woman answered the door with the same sharp eyes Emma remembered from her childhood lessons. "Well," she said, looking Emma up and down, "you've aged into your stubbornness." Emma smiled faintly. "I need help. I'm training a rescue horse for the showcase." Mrs. Grafton's brow rose. "And you're asking me? After all these years?" "I'm asking because you're the only one who won't tell me it's impossible." The older woman hesitated, then motioned her inside. The house smelled of leather, dust, and peppermint. "Show me what you're working with," she said after a long pause. The next morning, Mrs. Grafton came to the ranch. She stood by the fence, observing silently as Emma led Chance through warm-up exercises. After a few minutes, she nodded. "He's frightened but honest," she said. "That's a good start. But you're holding back." Emma frowned. "I'm being careful. He's still learning." "Careful doesn't build trust," Mrs. Grafton replied. "Honesty does. You can't ask him to be brave while you're still afraid." The words struck deep. Emma swallowed hard, glancing at Chance. "I haven't ridden since." "I know," Mrs. Grafton interrupted softly. "That's what you're really training to do." The truth settled between them like dust in the morning light. Emma didn't respond, but she understood. It wasn't just Chance who needed to overcome fear. That evening, long after Mrs. Grafton had gone, Emma sat on the fence and stared at the old saddle hanging by the stable door. Her fingers twitched toward it, then withdrew. She could still feel the echo of her last fall, the moment when the ground rose up faster than she could breathe. Her hands trembled. Chance stood nearby, grazing quietly. When she looked at him, something steadied in her chest. "All right," she whispered, "let's try." She placed the saddle on his back slowly, watching his reaction. He stiffened, then relaxed under her calm voice. "Good boy," she said, cinching the girth. The leather creaked softly, familiar and foreign all at once. Her hands shook as she took hold of the reins. The memory of the accident flashed again, metal, hooves, panic. But she forced herself to breathe. "We're different now," she said aloud, as if convincing both of them. She placed one foot in the stirrup and paused. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned out the cicadas. Then, with a deep breath, she swung her leg over and settled into the saddle. Chance shifted but didn't move away. The world seemed to hold still. The smell of leather, the warmth of his body beneath her, the wind brushing her face, it all felt impossibly fragile, like something borrowed from another life. For a long moment, she sat there, tears threatening but not falling. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." That small triumph changed everything. From that day on, training became partnership. She rode him every morning, first at a walk, then a slow trot. Each movement carried trust. Each mistake became a lesson. She spoke little but praised often, her patience shaping him as much as his strength shaped her courage. Weeks passed, and whispers began spreading through the town. People came to the fence, curious to see the useless horse everyone had dismissed. Some smiled, others shook their heads, certain it would end in failure. Emma ignored them. For once, her purpose wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving herself right. Still, challenges tested them. One afternoon, while practicing near the woods, a loud engine backfired on the distant road. The sound cracked through the air like thunder. Chance bolted, hooves pounding as panic took over. Emma's grip tightened. Her body moved instinctively, leaning forward, voice steady through the chaos. "Easy, boy. It's okay." He slowed gradually, chest heaving, sides slick with sweat. When he finally stopped, Emma slid from the saddle, legs shaking. She rested her forehead against his shoulder, whispering, "You came back to me. That's what matters." She knew then that he trusted her enough to listen even when fear took hold. It wasn't perfection, it was partnership born through trial. Later that night, she sat by the stable window, watching the rain streak down the glass. Chance stood quietly in his stall, chewing hay. The sound was steady, grounding. Her reflection in the window looked different, stronger, softer somehow. The fear that had defined her for years was still there, but now it had somewhere to go. A few days later, an envelope arrived in the mail. Inside was a printed letter stamped with the county seal. Emma unfolded it slowly, heart thudding as her eyes scanned the words. Accepted. Entry confirmed for the county rehabilitation showcase. She laughed under her breath, both terrified and thrilled. The event was less than 2 weeks away. She ran her fingers through her hair, whispering to the horse behind her, "We did it, Chance. We're really going." Chance lifted his head at the sound of her voice, ears pricked forward as if he understood. Emma stepped closer, resting a hand on his muzzle. "They're going to see what I see," she said softly. "Not a broken horse. Not a failure. Just you." The horse nuzzled her hand, and for a moment, the world felt still again. Outside, the clouds parted, revealing a streak of moonlight that spilled across the paddock like silver paint. Emma looked toward it, feeling the weight of everything they had survived pressing lightly, almost lovingly, against her chest. The showcase was coming, and with it, the moment that would test everything they had built. But for now, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel the warmth of the stable, the steady rhythm of Chance's breath, and the quiet certainty growing between them. Whatever awaited them, they would face it together. The morning of the showcase dawned with a sky brushed in pale gold. Mist hung low over the fairgrounds, curling between the wooden fences and the white tents that lined the field. The air was filled with the soft hum of voices, the shuffling of hooves, and the occasional call of an announcer echoing through the loudspeakers. Emma stood beside Chance's stall, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the braided reins. His chestnut coat gleamed under the rising sun, brushed to a deep luster that made him look every bit the champion she had hoped he would become. Yet beneath her calm movements, anxiety coiled tightly in her chest. "Easy, boy," she whispered, running her palm down his neck. His muscles rippled under her touch. He snorted softly, flicking his ears toward her voice, grounding her in that small, steady moment. Around them, riders mounted sleek, expensive horses with practiced ease. Their laughter carried through the air, bright and confident. Emma tried not to look at them, but she could feel their eyes flicker toward her, toward the woman with the rescued horse no one believed would make it this far. Mrs. Grafton stood nearby, arms crossed, her sharp gaze scanning the crowd. "Remember," she said quietly, "you're not here to impress them. You're here to show him he belongs." Emma nodded, though her throat felt tight. The announcer's voice crackled through the speakers. "Next up, Emma Hayes, presenting Chance in the rehabilitation showcase." Her name seemed to echo in her skull. She drew in a breath, led Chance out of the stall, and stepped into sunlight. The field stretched before her, open, bright, filled with expectation. For a moment, all she could hear was the steady rhythm of Chance's hooves against the earth. As they entered the arena, a hush fell over the spectators. Emma mounted slowly, careful to keep her breathing steady. Chance shifted beneath her, but did not flinch. The world narrowed to the sound of the wind, the warmth of his body, and the faint creak of leather. "All right," she whispered. "Let's show them who you are." She guided him forward into a slow trot. The movement was smooth, tentative at first, but soon found rhythm. Each stride carried a quiet strength, a message of recovery, of resilience. The crowd began to murmur. A few recognized the horse from the auction, whispering to one another in disbelief. Emma kept her focus straight ahead, her hands steady on the reins. As they transitioned into a canter, something inside her loosened. Fear gave way to instinct. The two of them moved as one, his power balanced by her control, his trust answering her faith. It wasn't perfect, a misstep here, a stumble there, but it was real. Every motion told a story no ribbon could measure. Halfway through the routine, a sudden noise broke the rhythm, a metallic clang from a nearby gate. Chance's head shot up, his muscles tightening. The crowd gasped as he reared slightly, eyes wide with the old fear that still lived somewhere deep within him. For a heartbeat, Emma felt the ground tilt, the memory of her fall threatening to swallow her whole. But this time, she didn't let go. "I'm here," she said softly, her voice cutting through the noise. "You're all right." Her tone was steady, her hands gentle but sure. Chance's breathing slowed. He blinked once, twice, then lowered his head. The tension eased from his frame. Together, they resumed their pace, slower but surer than before. The crowd, once murmuring, now watched in silence, captivated not by perfection, but by courage. When the routine ended, Emma guided him to a stop at the center of the arena. She dismounted, resting a hand on his muzzle. His breath warmed her palm, his eyes calm and clear. For a moment, she forgot about the judges, the spectators, the years of failure that had led her here. There was only this, her and Chance standing side by side, proof of what patience could mend. Applause began softly, then grew until it filled the air. Emma blinked, her throat tightening. She hadn't expected it, not from this crowd. Even the other riders, polished and proud, looked on with something like respect. Mrs. Grafton, by the fence, gave a small nod. Afterward, as Emma led Chance out of the arena, a young boy approached, holding the hand of his father. The boy stared at the horse with wide eyes. Was he really the one everyone said couldn't be saved? Emma smiled gently. He just needed someone to believe he could. The boy grinned, reaching out to stroke Chance's neck. The horse lowered his head, accepting the touch. Emma watched the moment unfold, the quiet connection between fear and wonder, between doubt and hope, and felt something inside her settle at last. Later, after the ribbons were handed out and the crowd began to thin, Emma stood alone by the paddock. She hadn't won first place, nor second, but that didn't matter. She had earned something far greater. The judges' notes praised her patience, her understanding, and the evident bond between horse and rider. Yet what stayed with her wasn't the words, it was the feeling of freedom that still pulsed in her chest. Mrs. Grafton joined her, leaning against the fence. "You did well," she said simply. Emma smiled. "He did better." The older woman chuckled. "You both did something rare. You didn't just train a horse, you healed each other." For a long time, they stood in silence, watching the last rays of sun dip behind the hills. Chance grazed quietly nearby, tail flicking lazily, his once tattered mane glinting gold in the fading light. The fairgrounds were nearly empty now, but the echoes of the day lingered, the applause, the laughter, the shared breath of relief. Emma turned to Mrs. Grafton. "Do you think he's ready for more? For real competition?" Mrs. Grafton tilted her head. "He's ready for whatever you are. The rest will follow." That night, back at the ranch, Emma opened the stable doors and let Chance wander freely into the pasture. The moon hung low, painting the grass silver. She leaned against the fence, watching him move, strong, graceful, unafraid. For the first time in years, she didn't feel haunted by the past. The ghosts that once whispered of failure had quieted. In their place stood a quiet certainty, born of effort and trust. Chance lifted his head, eyes catching the moonlight. He looked at her for a long moment before trotting forward, as if inviting her to follow. Emma laughed softly, stepping through the gate. The cool grass brushed her boots, and the night air smelled of earth and rain. She reached his side and rested her hand against his neck. "We did it," she whispered. "But maybe this isn't the end. Maybe it's just where we start again." He nudged her shoulder gently, breath warm and steady. In that small gesture was everything they had endured, the pain, the perseverance, the unspoken promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the stars spread wider across the sky, Emma stood with him in the quiet field, her fear replaced by a calm she had never known. The world no longer felt like something she had to survive. It felt, at last, like something she belonged to. And somewhere deep inside her, she knew this was not the end of their story. It was only the beginning.